Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I'm Jess.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Color Out of Space, which came out in 2019-2020, directed by Richard Stanley, based on the short story by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, director Richard Stanley has kind of had a rocky career in Hollywood.
Yeah. Wilderness years. A few wilderness
He
years.
made a film back in 1990 called Hardware, which has kind of got a cult following now. It was recently restored on Blu-ray, and it's kind of it's a spin on one of the 2000 AD short stories about a killer robot. It was critically panned when it came out, as it was too soon after Terminator, and no one was that interested in it.
You don't want to be compared to the classic Terminator films.
No, you don't. But then Richard Stanley was working on The Island of Dr. Moreau. Famously, that film was an absolute disaster, and Richard Stanley was fired off of the project in the early days of filming. Subsequently, he never worked in Hollywood again, and kind of drifted over the last 20 years making documentaries, short movies, and music videos. And he had a script for an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation all the way back in 2011 and tried to ship it around to various studios, none of which had any interest in making this project.
Well, he grew up with the H.P. Lovecraft stories because apparently his mother was very into it. So it's a passion project for him. And again, you always find people who love the mythos, should we say, passionate about it generally, and you'll have people either define their careers by it, as we've seen in previous discussions, or in this case, kind of keep them bubbling under the surface. He clearly grew up with it. I think his mum was telling him stories from what I read when he was like 12, 13 years old.
That's right.
He desperately wanted to make this, and it's fun. But go on.
Yeah. And so it was Elijah Wood's production company, Spectre Vision, who kind of they were shopping around for an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. They wanted the script. And when they realized who had written the script, they immediately got hold of Richard Stanley and said, hey, we want to make your film. And they were already working with Nicolas Cage on Mandy at the time.
Yeah.
And they'd also worked with him previous to that on Mum and Dad. They didn't have a contract, but they hastily threw together some words on paper and said, Nicolas Cage, sign this. It means you're contracted, not binding, but contracted to appear in Color Out of Space. And of course, Nicolas Cage as well. His father, massively influenced by H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is a big fan, and he actually always wanted to play Herbert West in Reanimator. But famously, I don't think that film should ever be remade. That's just one of the best H.P. Lovecraft adaptations. Even though it plays with the source material, it is what it is.
Well, yeah, a good adaptation needs to play with the source material, I think.
Well, where we are now, a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stories are 100 years old.
Yeah, I know, it's strange. I mean, it's the same with all the great media. If you think about Lord of the Rings, heading towards that sort of time age.
Yeah.
And these great franchises, and like Sherlock Holmes, with the Downey Jr. movies, again, it's century-old storytelling that still comes around. The BBC are remaking it with a modern twist.
Yeah.
It's all, and that's over the last 10 to 15 years, but you talk about century-old media that I guess hasn't been surpassed on some level.
No,
because it's hard to be original, and I mean, I think this film demonstrates how to take other old ideas and rebrand them fantastically, colourfully, and new.
Well, the story of the Color Out of Space has been told previously. There was the Curse, which Ian and I reviewed many years ago.
Yeah.
There was also, in the early 2000s, a Sci-Fi Channel adaptation of the film, which I've not seen, and from all the reviews out there, I don't think anybody should see.
Yeah. Well, the reviews for this, before we go to dig deeper, weren't that bad. I mean, like the Metacritic scores and stuff, all positive or generally favourable.
Yeah.
And again, like you said before to me just before, the festival cycle really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, yeah. It was jam-packed screenings for this film at the end of 2019, just before its theatrical run, early 2020. And when at the festivals, they ate it up. It won countless amounts of awards, but when it came to its theatrical release, it had a limited run in just a few select cinemas, which meant you would have to travel far and wide to find a venue showing this film. our local cinema only housed it for a weekend, maybe a week, before it was dropped. And so, unfortunately, this film hasn't received the attention I think that it deserves, which is a crying shame. But I should also say that this film is full of twists and surprises and gimmicks and lots of fun things that if you were to watch this review before seeing the film, I think you'd be doing the film a little bit of a disservice. And so I'm going to say now that if you haven't seen the film, try and get hold of a copy. Buy the Blu-ray, buy the DVD, find it streaming somewhere.
We recommend it. I think that's safe to say. It's a great film. Its production value is amazing for the budget. $6 million, you said?
Yes.
Dollar. It's great. It really is premium shelf, dark Cthulhu mythos. It really is freaking fantastic. And if you've got the spare cash, buy a copy, get a Blu-ray. In the pandemic that we're currently living in, try to get it delivered safely. It's all, if you have the spare cash, spend it wisely. And this sort of thing needs supporting because it didn't make enough money. I mean,
it had a $6 million budget, and from looking at the IMDb stats and a couple of other stats pages, theatrically it didn't even make $1 million.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure about its DVD and Blu-ray sales. Maybe it's broke even. But I do know that Richard Stanley is looking at working on a trilogy of H.P. Lovecraft movies set within the one universe, looking to move on to a Dunwich Horror remake.
In the process of writing, as far as we can tell. But again, you don't know the numbers, so maybe it might have done better than we thought, but you can't be sure. So
So with that being said...
But anyway, yes, watch it before this because we'll spoil the living crap out of it because it really is worth a watch.
Yeah. So, with that being said, the story of Color Out of Space follows the Gardner family, which seems like they've just moved out of the big city, and now Nicolas Cage, who plays Nathan Gardner, wants to run an alpaca farm with his family. Joining the cast, we have Jolie Richardson, who plays Teresa, and I hadn't really seen her since Event Horizon. She played Stark, like one of the only survivors of that film.
A great English actress
that
I don't see enough of. And I mean, I know Hollywood had the penchant for sidelining female actors once they get beyond a certain age, and it's the Hollywood nature of sex sells, even though in this very PC age, the truth can't be changed. People want young, fabulous, but she's a fantastic actress.
Yeah, she's really good. We also have Madeleine Arthur, who plays Lavinia. And a bit of an Easter egg there for those of you that are familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, that Lavinia is one of the characters in the Dunwich Horror. So it's kind of like Easter egg dropping the extended universe here.
This film just coats them. I could make it's like the YouTube videos where they're going, did you spot this Easter egg? There's so many Easter eggs in this film. Just for anyone who loves the mythos.
And we also have Brendan Mayer, who plays Benny, the older son, and Julian Hillard, who plays Jack, the youngest son. And completing the cast, we have Elliot Knight, who plays Ward. That's Ward Phillips, which is a play on H.P. Lovecraft, which is Howard Phillips Lovecraft.
Yes.
So. And to complete the cast, we have Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong fame. Yeah. And I didn't recognise him at first.
I did. I'm afraid I'm not notoriously ever really been into weed, but I do watch all those films, and I love everything to do with his films. He's just a man who's got a lively soul, and I think he just exudes. Him and Cage are men of a similar cuts. They're both men who exude that sort of passion for what they're doing.
Want to hit?
Oh, no, thank you.
I didn't think so. Hey, some Java?
The introduction of this movie, we have Lavinia outside performing some kind of pagan magic spells, and she gets introduced to Ward, who explains that he's a hydrologist and he's here to kind of check the water because the mayor is looking at building a massive water reservoir in the nearby area that's going to feed the whole of the east coast of America.
And later you get a reference with the mayor that she wants the property.
Yes, but the family's now living there, and so she's not able to, encroach on the land.
Yeah.
And we get to spend quite a bit of time with the family before anything mystical or strange happens, which I think is quite good. There's been some criticisms that these actors feel like actors and not the characters they're playing, but I feel the pull and the friction within the family, whereas the elder children are not necessarily wanting to be in this house on this farm.
No, they're very distant, and again, the two older. I think everybody plays to a good standard. I don't think there's any bad performances as a whole. I'm just trying to think. No, I think even the little boy. Again, it's always the famous "don't work with kids or animals," but the dog. There's a dog in it as well, and he's brilliant. The dog, I actually think's one of the best trained kind of screen actor dogs I've seen. Because the way they use him in the film, he's just so obedient and so well behaved throughout the whole sequences. But in the sense that he does exactly what you want him to do in the scenes. And
Right.
the
The alpacas are well behaved too. Now, we are kind of given lots of glimpses into the characters, and one of the more striking ones is Nicolas Cage's part, where we find out that his father was abusive and that he's trying to stay away from that. At the same time, his wife is a cancer survivor, and the two of them are trying to repair their now sexless marriage. And they do retire to the bedroom, and that's when the strange light appears in the sky. You kind of get that weird purple magenta glow all the way around it, which is a little bit peculiar. I'm guessing that's maybe a reaction from the meteor coming crashing through the atmosphere.
Well, yeah.
Or it's a portal opening, it's
the-
not travelled through space, and it's a wormhole of some kind.
Well, it's hinted at being the color. It's the magic of the alien theme. As the whole story kind of echoes, it's the colour that is not describable. I mean, they have to show a colour because you've got to watch a film here, but it's the magenta, I think, when you see that, it is designed to be the colour that's inaudible. And I mean...
Well, the colour of the magenta colour isn't actually... It's one of those colours that the brain perceives when certain conditions are met.
Yeah, I mean, the key component which crops up with Cage is... His father was a painter, remember, and he said, "If you're not a painter, it's not worth it."
Yeah,
and that I think it's all about that kind of edge of the kind of idea that you're trying to paint a color. And he has a tick he picks up from after the meteorite hits because he keeps smelling the cancer ward, which his father died of.
His wife is surviving
but
of.
He suddenly goes vicious at certain points, and it's very weird. And that's the one issue with Cage is he's a little weird, too weird from the beginning, maybe. But again, that's the Cage factor. I think he gives 128%.
He's got so much energy, and when he's trying to be reserved, he does almost twitch. Like, that energy's waiting to escape him.
Yeah.
But I found the family stuff worked quite well. I like the dynamic between them all. You got enough sense of who they all were before the strangeness started to affect them. And the entire light washes over the whole house. The small boy is kind of sat outside screaming when the meteor hits. In the corridor
outside his parents' room.
And so everyone kind of rushes out there to see it. And there's like, oh, a meteor landed in the garden. And Nathan's just like, yeah, it smells horrible, but nobody else seems to be reacting the same way. It's like already it's affecting them differently.
This feels like everyone has their own personal descent into madness.
Yes, yeah. And it happens, it affects them at different times as well.
Like, and it's warping time and space. You kind of get the discussions later in the film, and it's doing this or doing that, and you're like, is it doing the same thing for everybody? Is it responding to the presence of a specific person and their own character flaws, should we say?
Yeah. Well, for me, it affects Jake first. He's the one who starts to hear whispers coming from the well, who makes friends with something inside.
Yes.
And then I think the next person to be affected is Teresa, the mother. And it's one of those quite shocking, gory moments that's really well set up in the film, where she's in the kitchen chopping away. And it's a kitchen nightmare, isn't it? Where you fear of cutting off a finger. Nathan, he's getting irate watching the news, because the news reporter is just like, yeah, we've got this Bourbon connoisseur who maybe saw strange lights in the sky.
But then I do like the other things, like when he's watching, just to reference TV in general, it's Arkham. They
mention Arkham, Innsmouth, Kingsport.
Oh, it's just so good.
It just name drops all those other locations.
It's all thrown in there, and it's beautifully kind of... It's woven into the fabric of this film. The whole thing is intelligently using the backdrop of the grand modern interpretation
Yes, yeah,
of
yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft's world. All we need now is an Armitage to show up somewhere, and it'd be perfect.
Well, when Ward turns up, he is again wearing a Miskatonic University T-shirt.
Yeah.
I need to get one of those.
And he wears it for the whole film.
He does,
essentially.
yeah. And so yeah, the mother in the kitchen cuts off her fingers, but she's oblivious to the fact that she's done it and continues chopping away. The blood splats Jack in the face, who screams for his dad, and the mother just turns around like, dinner's ready, missing her fingers. And it's one of those things now where it's like, okay, the horror movie, now you take the adults away from the children, and now you fuck with the kids that are now alone in the house. You know, they try and ring their parents at one point, and they just get garbled communications.
And the parents did try to ring them, but almost at a different time. Again, warping time and space. Because they go to a hospital in Arkham.
Right.
And I love the hospital again. It looks a little bit grubby, a little bit grimy, because it's a backwater kind of town. It's just, again, it's that kind of, everything's a little bit grim at the edges.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
One of the things I think they did fantastically well, and I didn't believe it at first, is that this whole film was shot in Portugal. Now, mainly because they needed to save a ton of money, and shooting it in Portugal enabled them to do that. But the forest, the woodland kind of setting that they're in, it immediately goes, oh yeah, that's definitely some kind of ancient New England forest. But yeah, it's the beautiful landscape of Portugal, which, yeah, they did a fantastic job on the scouting for the location.
Absolutely. And again, it's keeping that budget down. It's good they got all the actors, the quality of actors, and this is where people are going to grumble about anything with the actors. For the budget, I mean, seriously, it's fantastic. Again, it reminds me of the smaller, more truly indie horror. Well, this doesn't feel like an indie horror. This feels like a top of the shelf. I mean, sure, the CGI, again, wobbles at times, but I'd say that doesn't matter so much because somehow everything's wobbling because the world itself is being unwoven by this colour.
Well, one of the worst, I say it's the worst. It's not the most terrible CGI effect I've ever seen, but Jack has been communicating to the voice in the well, and we see a cocoon in the well break open, and this magenta-coloured praying mantis emerges out of it.
Flying,
And, it's not in the distance. The camera is right in its face. It fills the whole frame. And so you get to see the CGI spectacle of this thing. And I'm like, it's fascinating because because of the colour and because of the tentacles coming out of its mouth.
This is probably an aesthetic choice issue more than a CGI problem. If they toned back the colours and made it fit in with the setting around it, you would have not been bothered by it. But the problem...
It's because it is so
it's
strange
meant to
looking.
be the strange colour of outer space nature. And I think when you think the CGI is bad, I think sometimes that's not bad. It's intended. And it's because the way the film has to be.
It's so obviously CGI in comparison to, I would say,
You can't
to
trick
all
the
of the
human
wildlife that starts sprouting up around them. The characters don't really seem to care about it too much. But you see
He's
one
picking
plant at the
vegetables
well.
at one point. And
Yes, yeah. But well, I mean, that's much later in the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, at that point, there's all the fruit, but there's there's lots of insects flying around. It's almost like the magenta neon pink haze is just over everything at that point. But that's one of the things I like about the film is watching the landscape around them change over time, as well as the characters are.
Oh yeah, it's freaking awesome.
Now we kind of get some understanding as to how this infection is working when Ward gets taken by Benny to go and meet Ezra. And Ezra is this hermit that's living like in the backyard of the Gardner estate. We're explained that he used to be an electrician of some kind, so he's got security cameras everywhere. And he explains that, the little birds have told him about this hydrologist that's in the area. And he offers them weed, tea, coffee, and Ward is the only one who doesn't drink the water. He's past it and he's sniffing it and he's looking at it and he's just like, it could be rust, it could be some contagion of some kind. But Ezra's just like, it's right from the mother's tit, there's nothing wrong with it. As we would find later, Ward would do some water tests, see that the water is contaminated, and he comes back to warn the family not to drink the water, just to drink bottled water. But at this point, we've already seen Lavinia. She's drinking the coffee, she's throwing up.
There's a kind of interesting point that there's always some foreshadowing around the groundwater before even the colour outer space arrives.
Yes, because when Nathan's watching the news and they're talking about building this giant dam, it cuts to a dead fish with flies on it. So I'm like, well, this film kind of has that environmental message, that warning.
Yeah, well, there's something. I think there's almost a foreshadowing with the father, and like he was alone in this house. He had the strange compass thing that Lavinia
Yes,
had,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and it ends up in the hands of Ward at the end. There is an eldritch edge to the whole property, and the foreshadowing of the father being a painter. There's a lot of depth to the kind of undertones of the mythos woven into the very opening, even before the family kind of start to lose it because the water becomes truly tainted. If it was tainted a little before, I'm not sure. I mean, that's the thing. I got a feeling like the plants aren't growing right. Everything seems to be going a little bit wrong for the family.
Yeah.
And it makes you think maybe there was already underlying issues. It's
Maybe,
interesting,
yeah.
and it's interesting because that's a cruel twist of fate compounding their already terrible path towards complete bonkers madness.
Right, yeah, and this Lovecraftian deity thing is just bringing it all out of them.
Yeah, it's having a welly all the time.
Going back to some of the other bad effects is when they're coming back from the hospital and Nathan is singing away in the car, much to the annoyance of his wife, when she screams out in panic because there is a horrible CGI effect on the road.
The devil cat.
Of the skinless cat, or it's only there for a few seconds, so you don't get enough time to really look at it and go, how fake and horrible is that effect? But it is. It for me, it's the worst effect in the whole film, and it's only there for a few seconds, so I'm not going to harp on about it too much. But we did see the cat earlier at Ezra's place. G-Spot, the cat.
What? Come on, that's like the coolest name ever. A pussy named G-Spot? It's totally hilarious.
And of course, later on, Ward, when he's with the sheriff, they reveal this conjoined mess of animals. And you're just like, okay, so whatever is affecting this farm is actually affecting the wider area of this farm as well.
Yeah, all in all is emanating it's not even evil. That's the kind of interesting thing. It's just
that is the thing about Lovecraft's monsters, is that humans and humanity is insignificant.
Good and evil are alien.
It doesn't care
concepts.
whether it's harming you. It's just doing what it does.
It often doesn't harm you because it often doesn't kill you, which is probably crueler.
Right. Well, yeah, and we've had the foreshadowing of the horrors that are to come when Benny goes outside and sees that the alpacas have become this horrible conjoined monster. The color out of space is all over that barn area, and you can hear the alpacas screaming and crying out. And we eventually see their conjoined, horrible, John Carpenter-esque, Rob Bottin kind of state. And the camera doesn't spend an extended amount of time with them, but it is, thankfully, entirely prosthetic. It is a massive puppet. And that was really, really well done. I think they definitely touched it up with some CGI here and there. But because it was all in the shadows, it was very effective, very creepy. I loved the extreme close-ups of seeing all of the skin changing, like the blood vessels bursting and the teeth protruding out of the gums. Just like it was horrific, provocative imagery.
Oh, it's brutal.
And this spooks Jack, who goes running outside to his mother, and the color out of space zaps them both. And the film doesn't reveal it to you straight away. You're just like, fuck, they're dead. But you hear them whimpering in the background as Nathan and Benny are just stood there in horror and disbelief, until it eventually reveals to you that they have now become conjoined, that Jack is protruding out of the back of Teresa.
It would be a point, at this point we have to discuss Cage, because I think his interactions with this family throughout the whole film have become more and more extreme.
Well, he was really gentle and caring and nurturing to begin with, and now he's very toxic.
Well, no, he swings.
He's aggressive.
He's like bipolar.
Yes, absolutely.
He swings
yeah.
from being tranquil. He has a go at his daughter, and suddenly goes, "I shouldn't have done that." And but he's not aware of it almost, and he's not. There's no his insanity at this point. He's just treating everything as if it's normal. We'll all be okay as long as we work together. You work out each of their flaws, each of their kind of character traits. The son's a stoner, and I think he loses track of time. Remember, there's references.
Yeah.
And later on,
it's a very
he
stonery
seems
thing.
to
Yeah.
lose track of time and space, as he says. His sister Lavinia is a bit of an occultist. and she's trying to protect the family. Like at the beginning, she's trying to protect her mother from cancer.
Yes, make sure it doesn't come back.
Yeah, and that shows she loves her family. And again, these are important. Though she has conflicts, she's aware something's up. But she seems to be the one holding it the best and the worst together. By this point, we haven't mentioned she's carved herself up.
Yeah, she's gone to the Necronomicon and made a blessing to Yog-Sothoth to protect her and her family.
Yeah. Well, she only said to protect herself. She's carved herself
Yeah.
with loads of runes.
Well, it's also, she asks it to get her out of there.
Well, you need to be specific. There's a famous genie wish scenario in that one.
Right. Well, there is a small bit of trivia here for you, is that the director and one of his longtime friends actually performed a ritual from the Necronomicon to Yog-Sothoth, and his friend wanted to do this ritual and ask for Yog-Sothoth's blessings to make sure the film got made. And sadly, he passed away before the film was finished. And so the director's just like, well, if you believe in that occultist kind of stuff, I hope my friend's soul wasn't the price to pay for the film being made.
You need to be specific about the details of any pact you make with the powers beyond. There's a lesson in this.
Right. It's just one of those weird coincidences. But the character of Ezra, according to the director, is the embodiment of his friend, his lifelong friend. Because the director lived in South Africa, mother loved Lovecraft, then got into African voodoo and everything else. And so the Lovecraft and voodoo kind of thing kind of merged together.
Yeah, and again, that's the cool thing about this. It's just
and
all
so
woven.
her kind of prayers from the Necronomicon to another deity. We'll get into that in a little bit, because I don't know how effective it was or wasn't, and the film is very ambiguous about some of those.
I don't think it helped at all. I think it's a distraction for the mythos lovers to some extent.
It's definitely a subplot that doesn't really pay off.
No, and I think it is maybe the smoke and mirrors of narrative storytelling. Whether or not there's later stories to tell and she'll rematerialise, well, that's a problem, having witches come back from the great beyond.
Indeed.
It's probably a trouble. But hey, that'd be cool to see in another film. And that's what we maybe have to look forward to.
Indeed,
but keeping on this.
But keeping on this, now this is one of the divisive things about the film, as we've mentioned, is Nicolas Cage. And after... he's taken his wife and son back inside, the conjoined mess that they are. The son, Benny, he's unable to get hold of the police, the phones aren't working, and so Nathan heads back out into his car, which also refuses to start, which is where we have a Nick Cage breakdown.
You cocksucker! You cocksucker! Ah, 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 ah.
I'm understanding of that. Like, I get it. Like, he is in a really shit position, and nothing is going right, and this is kind of the first real breakdown he has.
Yeah, I mean, I see people have a real issue with Cage. In some cases, he's very Marmite for some people. Honestly, in this, you need to put aside apparently people laugh at the cinema.
Yes.
And stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't get any of that. I mean, I thought the tension build and the pacing and the opening, because they opened it correctly by introducing Nick Cage a little bit further into the film. I felt you got the tone immediately, and Cage's spectrum of acting is good for this. He plays a man pretty sane at the start. He's got a few ticks. There's frustrations clearly in the family. The mother, we didn't mention, she's like a stockbroker. And it reminded me a little bit of what I grumbled about at the beginning of
Dagon,
because it's like ambiguous. In this, she's talking some believable gibberish. And that's important. You need to just put a little bit more effort into your dialogue, like they did there, and just make me believe this.
Right.
And she's struggling to keep clearly, she's a stockbroker, I assume, running it remotely from a home out in the sticks.
And of course the colour out of space is distorting the internet, it's distorting everything, and so she's losing clients and getting frustrated, and she's blaming her husband, but he's also going crazy because all of the fruit on the farm is ripe and poisoned. And then when we get to the alpaca sequence where his wife is now this monster that he's struggling to look after, and the alpacas are still screaming and crying outside, and so he goes and grabs a shotgun, goes in there and sees the horrible monster and just blasts it. Again, a little bit over the top Nick Cage like, as he's just screaming like a lunatic. But at the same time, I'm like, what is the sane response to
Again-
blasting this monster?
Again, Nick Cage, there's certain actors who play themselves in films, which isn't true of Cage. I think that's cruel. I think Cage is clearly he can't get away from some of his own character traits, should we say. But I think he does have some depth and breadth to his ability to emote and show restraint or not. And in this, I think he was let loose. He's that one actor that you go, there's so much embracing of the material. Now, different actors do it different ways. I mean, I personally love like classic Hammer horror because you want to grumble about special effects that don't really stand up.
Oh yeah,
Mummy
I do.
sequence chases. With Cushing and Lee, they both generally give 110%. They believe what they're reading.
They make the world that they're in believable for the audience.
Now, I think other actors, and they give 110% because, I mean, especially with Lee, a Lee man whom we embraced. Lee embraced absolutely everything fantasy. He loved Tolkien. I mean, the man clearly delighted in playing Sauron and grumbled when they went from anything from the source material and that. He was a true believer in what he was doing, so he was he escaped to it. Other actors can play a good role, like Alex Guinness in Star Wars, but in real life they're like, well, it's just all it's silly, isn't it? And he doesn't get it. But people like Lee and Cushing gave everything and were totally into it. And I think Cage is the same.
Nicolas Cage and the director Richard Stanley and the production team behind this were all invested in getting this.
And you get
to
that,
work.
and that's the thing with Cage. He does that for every project he's on.
Yeah.
People go, "Oh, Cage is just phoning it in," and it's just like, no, he's being Nick Cage. Just like even in his worst films,
it's the Wicker Man remake, that. You know that meme. You know, it has seriously tainted the man's career.
Yeah, the director's. It wasn't entirely his fault. Well, I don't know, Lee was in that ironically as well, but it wasn't again entirely his fault with those sorts of projects. A director needs to know how to use Cage.
Yes.
And I think in this film, Cage is used precisely.
Richard Stanley knew who he was getting involved with.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
he knew when to rein him back and knew when to let him loose. And I think the film really works.
Absolutely,
I really believe when Nathan Gardner is having those meltdowns, you know, part of me goes, huh, Nicolas Cage doing his thing.
Open my eyes! Eyes! Ah! Ah! You cocksucker! You cocksucker! Ah! 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 Ah!
But a part of me was also like, damn, I completely feel for this guy right now.
Yeah, and like I said, the reviews for this film, I think most people, as I said, were pretty strong and favourable.
One of the good sequences of performance here from Nick Cage is after he's killed the alpacas and then comes back upstairs into the attic and he's got the shotgun to his wife's head. And, you know, and it's just like, you know, he got the idea after killing the alpacas that he's going to have to go and put this monster down, put it out of its misery.
He tells his two older children to go downstairs.
Yeah, and I was like,
foreshadows, you'd assume.
Exactly, and you know, and the kids saying goodbye to their mother, and Nicolas Cage just kind of being there, and you know, and Benny says, "I love you, Dad." And he's like, "I love you too." And, you know, I'm just like, you know, I'm really feeling the emotion of this family here, and but at the same time, they've all gone loopy. They're not who they were at the beginning, and the color is manipulating them.
Yeah.
So the two kids decide, you know what, they're going to pack their bags and get out of there. And
Dad's going crazy. They kind of realise their dad's on the way out because he kisses his wife, as you say. He goes in, and you get this wonderful
the
goo
slime,
kind of, and he goes in for another kiss afterwards. You're like, ah! But you kind of get the idea that he is fraying mentally at the edges.
Yeah, because he's just like, I'm gonna take you for a drive. We're just gonna get out of here. Everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah. And the kids are then talking about. Finally, you actually get the conversation that I think time and space are warping because her brother's into physics, and that's foreshadowed early in the film. Again, there's a lot of foreshadowing that goes on in the early half of the film, and he's like, "I was like at the edge of a black hole where time and space starts to warp. We're being screwed with, and I'm not sure we'll get away." So at that point, Lavinia gets her horse, which you've only seen from the very beginning of the film.
Yeah.
But as she's standing there with it, you get the glow in the eye of the horse,
right?
And you're like, oh. Bollocks.
And the horse kind of skits off and runs off.
Rides off into the distance.
And so they're just kind of like, well, we're miles and miles away from anywhere. It's the woods of Arkham.
12 miles deep in an ancient woodland.
With all the crazy stuff that's going on, they decide that there's no chance of them making it out there on foot.
Yeah, so at that point they kind of go back to the... Well, I think their father... No, they are starting to walk away.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the well.
Yes.
Sam, is that you?
Benny!
This is the horror movie where everybody's making the wrong decisions, and you know it, other characters know it, and there's
But they've no control over it
He's
anymore.
climbing down the freaking well, and you're like, this is just a bad day, and you know what's going to happen, and it happens, and then
He gets disintegrated into the light. He just disappears.
And Lavinia then's like, we're screwed, and then her father comes out and grabs her.
Right.
And then you're like, oh dear, and drags her upstairs and throws her in the room with his not dead wife and young son.
And again, I'm just like,
and
you
can
age
feed
old.
your mother, and slams the door. And
I was like, it's the age-old, decrepit, deformed family member in the attic or basement space. I'm like, we're here again.
Oh, but again, like we said, it's a mashup of all these wonderful classic tropes, but it's done with such vim and vibe. It's just fantastic.
Honestly, it's horrific watching her take that bowl of water and feeding her mother like a dog.
Yeah.
She's just lapping at the water.
It's just, this whole film is bloody magnificent.
We're definitely in the La La Land now as
the
Ward
lights,
and Sheriff turn
the light
up,
goes completely crazy. Everything.
and they're like, Nathan, where's your family?
Oh, and I love it. The two lights are flashing.
Yes.
The police car, and it adds to the purple, and you got the red and the blue, and it's now just a
Psychedelic kaleidoscope effect.
Well, yeah, it reminds. Again, it's like Mandy to an extent because it plays on that. Let's just be clear: the cinematography of this film is bloody fantastic.
It really is.
It is.
Truly
You could grumble
is.
about a few bits of CGI, but again, I think they're surreal sometimes for the sake of being surreal.
Yeah.
I feel they could have toned that CGI back. But I think they were like, no, we want these jump out moments.
Yeah.
And like you only see the cat for a second, it's designed to be a jump scare. Well, there aren't many. No. I mean, you expect jump scares and don't get them sometimes. And when you then get, like, when the sheriff gets taken out, which we'll get to in a second, that's a jump scare, but it's a jump scare that's no foreshadowing to it.
No.
And how that happens, you're like, what the hell's going on? And it's just the rules of the game are changing so fast that you're being scared because the rules are not there. There's no horror rules in play. When somebody needs to be killed, they're going to be killed. If somebody has to live, they'll live. Good luck. Roll some dice. It's just take a step. What did you step on? A landmine. What did you step on? Flowers. Oh, it's 50-50. Good luck.
Right.
But yeah, it just goes bananas. But yeah,
completely. Yeah, where Ward and Sheriff turn up. And they're like, Nathan, where's your family? And he's like, well, they're all sat right here.
watching TV.
I'm like, as an audience, we don't see anything.
It's an empty
But
room.
but then he's just like, but Benny doesn't live in here anymore. He lives in the well now.
What? Teresa says, except for Benny. Benny lives in the well now.
You know, and that's what freaks out Ward and the Sheriff. They're just like, yeah, this place is fucked.
Because they already can tell, but they don't see a great deal. When they arrive, you don't see the fluorescent flowers and so much.
No.
So there is a point where you're like, how much is in the mind of the people who've drunk the water,
Sure.
and how much isn't?
Yeah.
And again, it's the individual madness of each character that's playing out before you.
It takes a little bit of time for it to manifest and show itself.
Yeah.
But again, the real horror is shown with the next big creature reveal, where they hear the screaming and the noises coming from upstairs, and they rush up there, and the bedridden, sickly mother-son hybrid is now mutated into a horrific H.P. Lovecraft monster, which scuttles along the floor at incredible speed, and you get that close-up of the mother's... decomposed alien face screaming at her daughter.
Yeah, pinning down Lavinia at this point.
And
who's still got all these eldritch runes carved into her skin from where she did it
maybe
earlier.
protecting her at this point, maybe not, because the mother doesn't kill her. Maybe there's some semblance of the mother's son still in there. Maybe it's like the Thing and it's trying to assimilate her into the being as well. Maybe it just wants to feed on her. I don't know.
The dad did throw her in there and say, feed your mother.
Exactly. But then Nathan has a moment of saneness again, and then kills his wife, blows her head off,
and his son.
And then Mercy kills the son as well.
Because he's bound to his mother. It's really wonderfully creepy.
But then there's like poltergeist-like tentacle hands coming up out of the well.
Yeah, they go back downstairs and they come out into the porch, and it's just...
And Nathan raises the shotgun just at the bottom of the frame to blast this entity, but the sheriff, I think, gets a mixed signal, believes that Nathan was about to shoot his daughter or shoot Ward, and shoots Nathan in the back, which causes the creature to retreat back underneath the well. And so I was just like, killing Nathan, shooting him, and horribly, well, he slowly dies here. but it also caused the creature in the well to retreat. So I'm like, were they linked somehow?
Yeah, well, they've all drunk from the water. And again, as we said, the only person who haven't at this point is the sheriff and ward.
Yeah.
So they're not affected in the same way. They're hearing things and they're kind of aware of the presence of things,
Yeah.
but it's not all so clear with them, as if
No.
some of the things spreading through the forest are psychic, almost a kind of only if you're corrupted do you see them.
Sure.
Which
yeah.
is cool. I mean, again, it's the layering of mythos ideas where how twisted you are.
It leaves it open
echoes
to
in the
interpretation
world.
as well. And I like that the film doesn't give you solid explanations. And the director even said, he was like,
awesome.
what would be the point of having Professor
keep loving
Armitage
this film.
just turn up and just give you 3 to 5 minutes of exposition as to everything that just happened? It takes the mystery and the flavour and the excitement and the discussion
yeah.
away from the film.
Well, Armitage, even when he does show up in the book, in some of the kind of literature I've seen with the uses of that character or similar characters, they don't do that. The well-written versions will kind of give you Armitage giving examples of what might be in play, but generally just off the point. Because nobody really gets what's going on. The motivations for what happens in this movie.
It's one of those things where I'm just like, you know, humans have evolved so much since these stories came out, and things about the universe and creatures under the sea that would terrify people 100 years ago, you know, it's now like science fact. It's no longer
Yes.
science fiction. And so having the cosmic horror affect modern day humans is a little bit more of a difficult task.
I think it requires more subtlety in the writing. And again, I think this is one of the best uses of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now, well, there's one of the big complaints about the film here is that Lavinia has been all about trying to leave. And when her dad is dying, Ward is like, yeah, it's time to leave. And she's just like, meh, actually, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here now. This is my house. I live here.
this is where my family is.
Right. And so it's like, well,
Ward's like, we need to go get the old guy out in the shed.
go and rescue Ezra as well.
So we'll be back for you. And she's holding a dead father. Now you got to remember, that's, I think, the break point for her is the loss of her last family member.
Sure.
She loses her mind. And some people would be like, I don't know. Again, you just need to think about the domino effect. People could say the young actress doesn't quite nail it. I think she's fine. I think she's otherworldly at certain points in the film, and I think that works with this.
Yeah.
And not in a Cthulhu sense. She just has this kind of teen girl angst thing, which is fine. She's in her own little space, and she's furious at the world. She's angry with her mother at some points, but she loves her, clearly, as we said earlier, that she's praying to keep her mother well. And you've got all these kind of ricochet kind of interactions between the family members, but they care. And that's the heartbreak, because all this horror is happening to a fairly healthy, dysfunctional family.
Right, yeah.
And like the dad's trying to cook while the mum's doing a business early, way back in the beginning of the film, and he's terrible. And that's like, she makes a comment, I'll cook next time, which sets up the finger
But it's
chopping.
one of those endearing moments, though, that just lets you know how much he cares. And even though he's not a good cook, he'll still do it for his family.
Absolutely, and they're struggling, and his alpaca ideas questionable, and people are laughing at points, and I can get it. And the setup with the alpacas is clearly a little bit funny, but it's not, because it's also sad, because clearly the father's trying something mad, and they're questioning, well, Dad, alpacas aren't known for their milk.
And of course, you have to be very gentle with the boobs. But once you get them warmed up,
Nice one, Dad.
I mean, for me, like, Lavinia at this point is gone. Like, the entity or,
Her father's death snaps her.
Yeah.
Up to that point, if she could have got out there with her brother, she was happy to leave with her older...
Yeah.
Well, I think he's her older brother.
Yeah.
Her older brother. She could cope, but losing a whole family just breaks her.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then obviously they run off to try to get the old
to
man.
go and rescue Ezra, the stoner, who... This is one of my favourite sequences in the film, is when they get there. You can't tell straight away.
They walk in really slowly, back to back, the sheriff and Ward. Ward's only got a light.
But it's because of the the lights that's going on outside and the tape recorder that's still playing, and it's playing. It's distorted. It's slowed down because of the environmental effect of the
It's
of
messing
the
with
entity.
electronics all through the movie.
But he's explaining how it was in the water that it was a color out of space, and just that line, it's very haunting, where he just says, "It was just a color."
it's just a color.
But it burns.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He's realised
It's like, is it
from
radiation?
meeting Ward telling him about the water being
Yeah.
tainted. Clearly, Ezra figured it out to some extent.
Yes. Well, because at first he had like a microphone to the ground, and he was like, "Look, you can hear them. They're moving around underground."
Yeah, and he's painted up with tribal paint, and he's got a bit of voodoo stuff. He's a bit more the voodoo, while she's the Wiccan.
Right. Yeah.
So you've kind of got the references to two magics, and again, maybe he kind of it's the Eldritch Edge. It's like he gets through science and his own Eldritch knowledge, shall we say, an understanding before he dies in his seat.
Yes, completely. And you see the purple glows underneath his skin before it completely consumes him and turns him to
Ward
dust.
realizes he's going to blow because they've seen it happen before.
Right.
And they run. The sheriff and him are running at that point, and it's just so good, the sequence. The whole, this is where the rules change, because at that point, with no warning, a tree kills the sheriff.
It just picks him up out of the background and, shoves a branch down his throat.
Crushes him and shoves a branch down his throat. He's dead. Welcome to the end game. This is, as we said, the rules are no longer there, and it's just so good. And
It's a completely
if you've seen it,
hostile
you'll know what I mean.
environment. Yeah.
This is the landmine laid and game we're now playing. Ward runs back to get Lavinia. She starts to glow. She's obviously like, "We gotta go. We're going to we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy." And he's obviously fleeing for his life now, trying to escape everything. She detonates and more.
Well, there's a massive tornado of light emanating from the well,
Tries to drag
up into the cosmos.
and all the grass starts to kind of be like fingers trying to grab hold of him.
Right. And so this is where I want to bring up what we mentioned earlier, is that she went to the Necronomicon, she did a spell to Yog-Sothoth, and now she's here like it's an altar, and she's arms stretched.
And the symbol carved in the middle of the
glowing
forehead,
as
glowing beautifully.
So I'm like, did she cast a spell and now, everything all the damage, everything that's been tainted is being sucked up into the universe and being destroyed, and it also consumes her with it, or is the entity, the messenger, as we've also told that it is now retreating back to its home planet, as it generated enough energy and consumed enough biomass that it can now send itself somewhere else in the universe?
Well, yeah, and
is her spell the reason why it's now retreating from our planet?
Yeah.
It's like there's so many different ways of interpreting it.
I know, and it's not meant to be easily answered.
Is Yog-Sothoth just going, you cast that spell, now you're mine? And just claiming her
Well, she
instead?
said, "Keep me safe," and I mean, it was the wording was different the first time. So, in a sense, is she whisked away somewhere else?
Yeah.
Although, as we move on, Ward then finally staggers back to the house.
And she's sat on the couch with the rest of the
The
family.
whole family's all
But
back
at the same
together
time, I'm like,
again. Or at
those
first
are all-
just the dad.
Yes.
And he's like,
But it
"You were dead."
manifests all of the family. So I'm like, that's not the family,
No, but
unless it
only
is the family
only
out
the dad
of time.
Gets up.
Yes.
Only the dad gets up, but you hear a little bit of voices from earlier in the film, having conversations. This is where time starts to fray, because you're almost reliving snippets of earlier in the film where they were a happy family.
Yes,
and
yeah.
the dad gets up to attack him and drag him into the light.
Right.
He fights off the father and fights down into the wine cellar, and then you've got Nicolas smashing on the door of the wine cellar while Ward cowers in terror
Right.
at the base of the
There's an
steps.
explosion of light.
All the wine bottles detonate around Ward.
Yeah.
And then Cage's character vaporizes and drawn in, and it faced white.
Yeah. And we watch Ward emerge into the ashes of the surrounding landscape. I think you see
It's like
a
several
dead
kilometers.
body. There's a hand, and you kind of get to see the scale of the blast. This blasted heath in the ground.
Yeah, it's like a kilometer. The whole house is flattened, gone. He picks up. He somehow, by the nature
The compass,
the
right.
compass that was her grandfather's.
Yeah.
Nick Cage's father's weird eldritch tool.
It's just this antique now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just and again you're like, what is this? What kind of some sort of mystical wayfinder? So it's just again, if they're seeding it for future, spins it off into the kind of.
I think
Dunwich horror.
it's
Or
an
if
open-ended film,
Yeah.
but it's very much concluded at the same time.
Yes, if they make another film, if they do or do not make another film, we will see. Again, this may or may not have made enough money to justify it. It lays the seeds if they wanted to do a indirect sequel.
Yes.
So
yeah.
to use Ward, to use some of the things laid out in this film.
Ward is there, and the dam has been built. And he explains, like, I'm never going to drink the water out of this thing, because he saw what happened. And I like the fact that he's got grey in his beard. I'm like, he's been tainted.
It's been a few years later.
Yes.
Because obviously the dam would have taken
a few, to build it.
Years to build. But in the case of Ward, fantastic actor. He really does portray it, and it's just such.
But the film kind of goes, okay, it's over. But then you see that praying mantis flying across the sky, and it's just like, oh wait, some of the creatures are still there. Whether they are able to infect the area like the entity that landed there does, or whether it's just a leftover byproduct of it.
It's again foreshadowing.
Or the entire dam becomes infested with the colour out of space and it wipes out the entire planet. Yeah. And we end up with the horoscope that we did see of the other alien planet with all the tentacles and snake and worm-like creatures.
There's different things in play, so if you want to, we could go on for ages with this. This is at this point, it's the kind of endless conspiracy theories where you kind of
the speculation of it all. But that's what's fascinating.
It's the eldritch
and
horror.
Horrific.
You can't pin it down, which is why it's good horror, and that's why this type of horror may be difficult to sell to the general audience, because people...
I think so, yeah.
It's why people like certain types of horror movies that do better than others. And it's why people like certain types of action films or a Marvel film. There's a formula. There's a logistics to it. I like the Marvel films, but there's a lot of them, and they do almost the same pattern, carbon copy to every one of them. I mean, certain directors add more flair, like I love Taika Waititi's works within the Marvel Disney House of Mouse, but it's still very much a heartbeat paced action movie with heroes and villains. The same works with most horror films. As we said, the action beats are predictable, jump scares are common. The most common horror films that see in Hollywood are jump scare movies. And they kind of suck in my personal opinion. I don't like a classic jump scare film because it's just you become numb to it. In this, as I said, when the cop dies, I wasn't expecting that. That was awesome. Just because the rules changed again. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, Jess, what are your favourite or most memorable scenes from the film?
Probably the tree. I go back to that bit every time because I was like, you did it. Although anything where the colour out of space, like the bit where it finally reveals itself to Ward and the cop and Lavinia and her father, and it appears from the well, you're like, oh, now people who are definitely not drinking from the magic water are seeing crazy stuff. Oh, well, I'm glad. Because at that point, you're still not sure if it isn't a foreshadowing somewhere. And I think they're playing on it like poison groundwater.
Right.
The idea that it's just poison groundwater for the whole film. And I think they were trying to play that a little bit. I don't think they played it long enough.
Sure.
And I think Ward was seeing through the cracks in the veneer of that narrative early. I think they could have played with that differently. I don't think I want them to, because I love this film and I think it is just great. I'm a bit lost for words. It really is a fantastic modern
There are
film.
so many memorable moments in the film. Of course, memorable for me was the terrible CGI cat and the CGI bug. I'm just like, it's
I like the bug, but I agree with the cat. I think the bug had to look that fluorescent for that scene. But it just was jarring. And I think the jarring's the issue. Because when you got in close, they really did invest in the CGI on it.
Oh,
little
absolutely.
Tentacles that came. Oh, it's an all-praying mantis with wings. Oh, no,
it's a Cthulhu one, right?
Yay.
But the alpaca conjoined monster was horrific. The sound effects, the lighting, the movements, the details, fantastic. Again, for the mother-son hybrid monster.
Film was just
and
scored.
The child weeping. Of course, the music in the film was also fantastic. It was done by Colin Stetson. The music was awesome. You could have almost called this the sound out of space. You're like, the music in the film was calm, but towards the mid part and when things were getting creepy, it was scraping and horrible, and it was driving you insane. It was really, really effective.
Close encounters, lighting. I mean, the light shining through dark, contrasting with bright lights, unpredictable lighting. The cinematography as a whole was just a masterpiece. I can't find many criticisms for this film.
No.
The cage factor might break some people. I mean, for me, it was not. He was brilliant. I loved him in this. I love Nick Cage. I can list off half a dozen films I love Nick Cage in. I'm a fan. Maybe that makes this film a Marmite for some people because the presence of Nick Cage will just tear you out of it. But no, it is just a polished gem in my opinion in the horror genre.
Yeah.
Especially, I'd say, as we were foreshadowing earlier, it is the bar to which all other Cthulhu-like films should be set modernly.
I think so, yeah.
It is. You could improve, maybe have the script. You could argue if people want a more. See, this is where your improvements are just going to make it more archetypal as a normal horror film. I think having the unpredictability of eldritch horrors like this is what defines the mythos. You never win. You just draw at the best.
At best.
And that's
well, this family lose.
Yeah, but Ward draws.
Yes.
Because he staggers away at the end, and sometimes knowledge is the power.
Sure.
And knowledge is the victory, because it's the kind of point with a lot of the best kind of Arkham stories that you come across is you prepare to defend against the next attack.
Sure.
Because they're not attacks perhaps out of vindictive hatred of you.
No, it
they're
doesn't care.
They're just wandering through.
Yeah.
Oh, look, humans. Oh, let's play. Oh, they've liquefied and done straw. They're all on my fingers. It's not mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's just magnificent. That's dark mythos.
Yeah. But because I'm a big fan of those, practical effects is one of the reasons why those scenes stand out for me. But in terms of performances, I love the Nick Cage sequence where he comes up to kill his wife, but just can't bring himself to do it. I thought it was a very touching moment. I think one of the most effective sequences was Tommy Chong's tape recording being played back almost in slow motion. So creepy, so atmospheric.
And it was almost a
and
little
it
bit
came
of,
at just the right time in the film.
and a bit of wisdom almost.
Yes,
like
yeah.
It's confirming.
He's half right.
Yeah, it's confirming everything you're aware of, and there's
Yes.
almost a spirituality to him that's
Yeah.
saying, I've realised that what's happening and I'm doomed already.
Yeah.
Changing everything into something like the world it came from, into what it knows.
But I also loved the Nick Cage moments in the car, and I loved him with the tomatoes, smashing them into the bin after
Peaches,
taking a
I
bite
think,
of them.
some of them.
Peaches, tomatoes, yeah.
He was like, oh, these are great, they're finally growing. And you're like, they're not growing normally. And he's sitting there with his corrupted arms.
Yeah, well, he had that encounter in the shower where it was that liquid monster, that jellyfish thing that he picks up that grows tentacles in his hands. Yeah, there's so many good, creepy, memorable moments in the film. So, Jess, do you recommend The Colour Out of Space?
Well, you might give it away at the beginning, but I think we do. I think we opened this with saying, yeah, this is a fantastic film, and I hope it did well. I don't know, and I personally will, when this lockdown lifts, find a DVD, probably Blu-ray copy, 4K, nice, good copy of it. Just to support it, because honestly, I want more. I need more. I'm begging.
Enough.
I'm begging. Give me more.
We'll have to go break out the Necronomicon.
Because it feels like the team.
Sacrifice some more people.
Yeah, the team behind it. Yeah, a larger word, Richard Stanley. Thank you. You've got it. You whatever you've got going here, you're on the right road. I mean, it's always a gamble. More films, as long as they're coming in with this sort of production quality, and maybe they can get bigger viewings, maybe get bigger cinema releases. We can hope. We can hope for bigger and badder and better, because this is honestly my favourite horror film of the last couple of years.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, it's definitely sliding into my top. I don't like to give direct orders of films because there's different favourites in the genres and niches and how I'm feeling that day. But it's definitely in my top 10.
Sure.
Probably bordering on my top 10 favourite horror films of all time, because it just embodies the eldritch. You're screwed. That's the story here, guys.
Yep. I'm going to be recommending Colour Out of Space. I truly believe that this is the best adaptation of any of the H.P. Lovecraft stories. This is a fantastical cosmic horror story with great performances, stunning cinematography, and near perfect direction. The film develops the characters, giving you enough time to establish them before the horrors really manifest and the slow changes become apparent before all hell breaks loose. This film might have a slow pace for some viewers, but I think the time is well spent building the suspense, holding back its more frightening creatures for maximum impact. The visuals in this film are the most striking and highly memorable and very distinct, wonderful use of colour that's strange and captivating. It has a great soundtrack and it's a great blend of sci-fi and horror. It's mysterious, strange and fantastic, and it complements the film extremely well. Like you said, I hope the film gets a lot more recognition, becomes a cult classic and paves the way for more Lovecraftian horror on this scale. I think this is a wonderful film, really enjoyed it, it's highly entertaining, and I think you'd do yourself a disservice to not check this film out.
Spend your money wisely.
Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.